So my presentation today is about standardisation in construction cost control, and it's the method approach. Obviously, we've heard a lot today about BIM. We've recently just looked at quite a large infrastructure project in Poland, and these are all things that flow into construction cost management and control. So today, I'm going to give an overview for what most of you, I imagine, would understand: the construction sector, the origin of cost control in construction, the role of the quantity surveyor or the construction economist, construction as an economic measure, which was discussed earlier on in one of our keynote speeches, and the need for a global standard. So the main problems that we're seeing would be the sharing of construction cost information across the global economy. This has led to questionable data, and currently in Ireland we have a debate about the integrity of some of this information. We have a children's hospital which, during our lunch break today, it was noted will exceed a 2 billion euro bill cost when it was initially reported at 1.1 billion. It still hasn't got past basement, so this is quite worrying for our government. It is being compared to a hospital in Sydney, Australia. But the thing about this is that, is it like for like? And it's a big issue in relation to construction cost standardisation. Are we really looking at the same items? International construction cost comparisons, as we said, are projects of similar nature, and the construction output as a measure of economic growth and stability. So the challenge itself is to see if such a standard actually already exists, or if an existing standard can be adopted as the new standard. In this event, does that standard exist, and how does the global construction industry produce and introduce such a standard? We've already seen methods of measurement for the productions of bills of quantities across the global stage. We saw in the last number of years that the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors in the UK tried to introduce the new rules of measurement as an international solution for the production of bills of quantities and also for cost planning. However, this hasn't been implemented on a global basis. It didn't get the traction that people thought it would, namely because it came from one particular institute. So moving forward, the method and strategy employed to investigate the need for such standardisation as a desk study, a large lit review reviewing all the existing standards and the industry commentary, working groups incorporating action research and public consultation, the investigation of existing standards and various international approaches, and the review of the requirement of non-construction organisations such as the UN, the European Union and the International Monetary Fund to monitor construction growth. So the construction sector, as commentators would tell us, consists of on-site construction assembly, including repair maintenance works. Most people, when they think of construction, who are outside of the construction professions, actually just think about the building work. So like our tunnel project that we were talking about there, people thought about just the construction of it. However, it's bigger than that. And when you look at how building is currently financed with public-private partnerships and other such mechanisms of financing and operating, it's a much bigger, it's a much bigger sector than we would imagine. It includes the site preparation, the construction of all the building structures, the infrastructure up to and including building decoration. It also includes the supply chain of the construction-related products and the raw materials. And then finally, it also, as Eurostat would tell us, the further definition includes the professional services such as the management, design and facilities management. So both from the conception stage to the final operation stage, it's all included. So the origin of cost control in construction. We've seen many wonders in this planet, such as the pyramids and other such aspects. And they had a cost. They had to be financed. History will tell us about taxes. History will tell us of different mechanisms for financing these projects. And the cost control was more so about the money in rather than the money out. But in the 18th century, we saw the emergence of the quantity surveyor in the UK. And it's kind of some of the first references. Due to the increase in the volume of building works and client dissatisfaction with the method of settling costs of works. So the idea of a cost-plus basis, that we just pay for the time and a small percentage, time and materials plus a small percentage on top, but not having control of the actual budget. These were issues, and the client was worried about being told by the architect or the design team that it will cost X amount of money, but then being told that it's now X by 3. Where does this money come from? So the measurer, as Mr. Hoare said in 2009, became the quantity surveyor. So this measurer originally worked for the architect and measured the work of the various trades. The builder, the general builder, generally had, and the craftsmen had their own measurers who then turned around and debated and decided on the final account in those areas. The Napoleonic Wars saw a big change because England was waiting for Napoleon to come across the Channel. Okay, and what they did was, there's historical information which shows garrison towns being built along the eastern seaboard. But the procurement strategies that were available, even back then, wouldn't allow for this rapid construction. So it was a fair valuation of the works, settlement by fair valuation. So the builder was brought in who was already on, let's call it a framework. So the selected contractor would build the garrison and then would settle by fair valuation after the construction period. So this was a whole new way of looking at things. But the measurers were now employed as the surveyors. They surveyed the cost, they agreed the cost, they made the recommendation for payment. The Industrial Revolution saw separate trade contracting. What we see now is management contracting with each of our subcontract trades. And contracting in gross was discontinued. So the changing requirements of the client and the industry saw the establishments as such organisations as in the UK, the RICS, but we have many cost management organisations on a global basis. In Ireland, we have the Society of Chartered Surveyors, and we have numerous organisations. I've come across in the last 3-4 years about 60 different organisations through this study. So the role of the quantity surveyor or construction economist has changed as well. When we look back originally, it was measurement and valuation. Mid-20th century, we were talking about measurement, quantification, cost planning. The client now wanted to know up front, based on data that had been compiled, what the cost of the project was going to be. Looking at the procurement routes, construction cost control, final account preparation and agreement, settlement of contractual claims. In Ireland in particular, we see that a lot of quantity surveyors do get involved as the expert witness from a construction cost point of view and on contractual claims. 21st century has seen a whole jump here again, and the changeover has been into value management. Everyone wants value. Much different than cost management, because value, by my own definition, is like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder. Right? If we turn around and look at floor finishes in a publicly funded structure versus a palace in Dubai, they're both floor finishes, but what you're willing to spend and what you want in return are two different aspects. Risk analysis. Risk is huge. Like the project that we saw here earlier on, the tunnels, what's going to happen? We have to factor in that element of risk, and the risk was brought forward in different people's understanding from the questioning that happened. So the risk of damage by vibration, collapse of structures, the what-ifs of our project. Insolvency services. The major company that we saw having problems recently was the Carillion Group in the UK, who, with partners that they had in Ireland, we saw many people left unemployed and public projects not finished. So there's a lot of information there on that basis. How can we make this happen? Technical auditing, basically nearly like being the gamekeeper, so as to speak, in the construction process, whereby there's a quantity surveyor on both sides, one for the contractor, one for the client, and then the bank puts in somebody else to monitor because we're worried about the risk. Again, we're back to the risk. Cost modelling, which is coupled with the technology associated with BIM modelling as well, where the changes are going. Facilities management. Now that we're moving into the PPPs, the public-private partnerships for funding models and special purpose vehicles, we need to look at not just the capital expenditure during construction stage, but the operational expenditure. In the university where I work at the moment, a conversation was brought up by one of the contracting bodies about facilities management in the project over the 30-year lifespan of one particular building. And the quantity surveyor explained how he did something he never thought he'd have to do. He was working out whether it was better to have toilet rolls that he could basically take an individual sheet from, or whether over the lifespan of the building, whether on an actual roll where you just keep pulling and pulling and pulling and have that long thread of toilet paper, which one would be more cost effective. So a small little thing, and one that I get a bit of a giggle out of when I discuss this with students. They went for the individual sheets, but they reckoned that there was 1.3 million of a saving based on the size of the building and the number of toilet cubicles. Ridiculous, but it's still, I've seen the paperwork, it seems to be truth. As the employer's agent, and then within project management as well. So the range and roles have changed. They continue to change and will continue to change, especially with the technology that we heard about today. But now, construction as an economic measure. Our keynote speaker, after the tea break this morning, mentioned construction as an economic driver and a measure of success and basically the economy as a whole. Ireland found that out the hard way during the recession. We had a very, very buoyant construction sector. And if we look back, the measure that we use on an international basis will be the gross national product. So and that is the value. The GNP is the value of all finished goods and services owned by a country's residents over a period of time. DKM, in one of their reports back in 2016, looked at the construction output as a percentage of GNP across a range of countries. Now, instead of giving you the whole range of countries, I've just looked basically at Sweden, Ireland, and Spain. Sweden, the phrase we use in Ireland is that they seem to have kept their head. They remained their composure during the economic boom and the construction output. And they were at 8%. That was very nice. So this was looking back during this, they looked at it in 2006. So they were at 8%, which is a reasonable GNP level to have. Between 8 and 15% seems to be a growing or stable economy. In Ireland, we went a little bit mad. Right? We were at 22.6% in Ireland. People were leaving jobs in IT and other areas to become labourers on sites because the money was unbelievable. Block layers going home with €2,000 per week. Bank managers going home with 1,200. It was unrealistic. Spain had a similar kind of affair to Ireland. And then when you read the economic reports, both Ireland and Spain suffered really, really badly. End of 2006, 2008, we were in dire straits. The European average was 11 to 12%. The percentages alone kind of make me cringe a little bit because I was working in industry at the time making a lot of money. And then come the end of 2008, I wasn't making that much money anymore. But we supposedly learned a lesson. But our problem is that as we look at what's happening now, 2013, things started to look back up. Here we are, Q2 of 2018. Look at our growth. The growth is colossal in Ireland as a whole. This is happening in a lot of countries around the world. And who was it? It was both Turner Townsend and the Chartered Institute of Building. Chartered Institute of Building did a great document, the forecast towards 2030. Construction 2030. And they're telling us about emerging economies around the world. They're telling us about America, India, and China being, I think, 57% of construction output in the world will come from those three economies. Okay, so a huge amount, but all construction related. If we look at Ireland from Q1 of 2017 through to 2018 now, across all building and construction, so this is just an indices. So we're looking at 125.5 points up in the top corner here. But in the case of a little over a year and a half, 197.1. If you take a trip to Dublin, the students in our college ask, how is the economy doing? And what we usually tell them is to look out the window, down along the River Liffey, towards Dublin Port, and count the cranes. But then I have a flashback, like post-traumatic stress disorder, where I remember my lecturer doing that to me in 1997, and it was about the same number of cranes. And during the recession, the only reason we could see cranes in the Liffey is we didn't have the money to take them down. So there are numerous items like this. What isn't reflected within this particular diagram from our Central Statistics Office is the fact that a lot of the growth is around 3 or 4 main cities. Dublin, around its main commuter belt and within the city itself, has a lot of growth. Cork, down in the south, and Limerick are doing okay, and Galway over on the west coast is doing okay. But the majority of the workload is in the greater, what we call the Leinster area, which is about 6 counties on the eastern seaboard. And it's where the majority of business takes place in our country. Every sector across the construction sector seems to have taken off in some manner, some more than others. Okay, residential building. The horrible thing about residential building is we'll tell you at this point that we're probably 6 years behind in our outputs. But the question is, will we be there in another 6 years? So we have queries in this one. So, but the need for a global standard. Ireland is not the only country that has this type of phenomena where construction plays such a major role. It's everywhere. And construction is a measure of the economic status, but are we comparing like with like? Personally, I will say on the basis of my involvement for the last 3-4 years looking at this, that no, we're not. It also depends on who's looking at it from sector to sector. I'm going to jump back a second to what I said about this amazing hospital that we're building and we can't control the costs on. We are awaiting a report. We've had damning accusations by a group of accountants working on behalf of the government. And they've told us about this cost data, but the report hasn't been published just yet. So as a construction economist, I'm looking at these figures that they're putting into the national press, and I'm saying, but where are they coming from? And what is the project? So when we look at it in this manner, there are a lot of questions. But a survey that was carried out by BCIS in the UK in 2009, in conjunction with the CEEC, the Construction Economists of the European Community, asked a number of questions of membership around the world, or around Europe predominantly. So 40 countries with cost management professionals were surveyed. 50% of the countries surveyed said that they don't have a published elemental structure for buildings or its constituent parts. So if I said to you in your country, how much are external walls? But external walls mean one thing to me and may mean something else to you. And if we're not using, if we don't have a standard within our own country and we're using information from other countries, as is what was stated here, that where no local standard is available, a foreign standard or an in-house ad hoc standard, so something that has been made up, is utilised, well, then we have an issue. The Irish experience of this type of affair of foreign standards or in-house standards being utilised was when we used to produce our bills of quantities, but we used about 12 different methods of measurement, and that could just be on the residential aspect. So were we measuring like for like? Were we comparing it? Does your contractor know what you're pricing or what you're asking them to price? There was also no common expression of a cost per metre squared. So in relation to the cost definition or the floor areas. Now that issue has been taken in hand to an extent with a thing called the International Property Measurement Standard. The level of cost information and data classification fell short in these countries and what would have been welcomed by many of the professionals. And in my discussions with members of the CEC and then globally, they've all had, I'll class it as the scratch head moment where they kind of go, oh, is that what you mean? Because this is what we do. But how do we compare that? So moving forward, the need for a global standard approach. Okay? Most industries are dependent on international standards, so the ISO, British standards. Okay? And we've seen today, I think we saw within BIM, there's ISO standards for classifications and other such aspects. For business, standards are strategic tools that reduce costs by minimizing waste and errors and increasing productivity. They help companies to access new markets, level the playing field for developing countries, and facilitate free and global trade. So that's the ISO's own definition back in 2005, okay? Or 2015, sorry. So we are in the scenario whereby that's a good place to start, that we all have a standard definition, that we can all refer back to the same documentation, and that we're all talking about the same aspect of the works. The World Trade Organization thinks that we should definitely do that. It says that we should do it across all the professions, particularly professions that have an input on the economic outputs. The EU say the same. The United Nations got behind this, as did the IMF, even in the initial days. And this is what was proposed as a solution. Now I say was proposed because it's actually coming into effect now and is partially working already. A standard cost reporting system for all areas of construction. International Construction Measurement Standard, ICMS. Okay? It's not a method of measurement, so it won't replace your own local methods of measurement. So we use a thing called the ARM, UK uses NRM, and there's many, many around the world. It's a standard written by construction cost management professionals from more than 45 representative bodies. To be honest, that's actually nearer 50 at this moment in time. And what we are talking about by representative bodies are the likes of the Society of Chartered Surveyors in Ireland, the likes of PAQS, the Australasian Quantity Surveyors, and cost managers around the world. Okay? And many from the countries that you're here today from. It incorporates the International Property Measurement Standard. So the Property Measurement Standard sets out internal, gross, external floor, or gross internal and gross external floor areas and comes up with a standard that suits. Because where part of this problem lay is we were talking to people from certain jurisdictions, and the balcony on an apartment block forms part of the internal floor measurement, because in certain countries you'll eat out on the balcony more than you'll eat inside. In Ireland, no, we won't do that because it rains too much. But unfortunately, we've said that we're going to measure in this manner, so now we do measure it in that regard. But for the different types of buildings and their uses, what actually incorporates a gross internal, gross external will change. Providing standardization in cost reporting on a global basis. This is the key for me from this basis, because we're in the scenario whereby I want to know what a bedroom in a hotel costs in Dubai versus Dublin versus Paris. I want to know what a house costs per square metre in all of those locations. I want to take into changes in building regulations, site conditions, and other items. So this can also be incorporated into both existing and emerging economies. So I could use this in Ireland tomorrow. I can use it in a new country next year or whenever they come into being. So the benefits in phase one. So phase one was just the elemental basis, to breaking it down into constituent parts of construction. The ability to compare similar projects on a global basis, and a compilation of cost information on a larger scale. A cost database. That would be wonderful to be able to just pull up a database and know that it's measured in the same manner, reported in the same manner, and utilised that way. Phase two is currently underway. The standard is being, how can we put it, modified to take into account life cycle costing, which is another great aspect, particularly when we look at operating the building for the lifespan of it. And if your government is like my government, they're the largest asset management company within your state. And the last phase, the final phase, which is yet to start, is the incorporation into the digital cost planning and management. So BIM, coding in the cost centres into your model so we can extrapolate quantities into the right cost centres. And that is me. My declaration statement by right should be the beginning to incorporate or not. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Charles. A very intriguing presentation. We have spent almost all of our spare time due to 2 missing presentations, so I will say we have room for 1 question maybe. Yes, at the back.
Okay. I fully agree with what you said. We do need that if we want to bring the construction industry on the higher level in all the sectors, in all the countries. One question that bothers me the most is how do you classify all of the elements included in the buildings, in the infrastructure? Because that's a major task that's getting bigger and bigger since more and more producers of different elements, of different construction types are coming into the marketplace.
Okay. The coalition that forms the ICMS set up a standard setting committee, which there was 27 members came forward and joined the standard setting committee. Those 27 members, they're not all from residential construction or from commercial construction. Some of them are from mining, tunneling, and various sectors within the construction industry. So if we were to take this, the fresh example is in my mind. I'm using your tunnel again. I'm sorry. Okay. But if you look at that rail track, so obviously railways will be one major aspect, but the one main project there would be the railway from the start to the finish. Okay. But there are sub-projects within that, which could be measured in a slightly different manner. And that would be, say, the train stations. Then there's also other aspects that could be looked there, which be the cost of the design, because design and build, and also the control mechanisms for vibration and other such aspects, which wouldn't form part of. So the preliminaries will be more detailed and a few other items. But the ICMS will allow you to break that down into a number of projects so that they're measured as, say using the industry and norms for that particular part of the project. Does that answer your question? So you kind of, with the complexity of the project, you can actually break it down into more manageable parts, but then report it back into one major cost center, which is the overall encompassing project.
Okay, because I was mostly interested if it's based on the projects or if it's just general overview of the entire industry, and I think you answered it, since it's the projects are breaking down into units, and then...
If you have a look, the standard itself is actually available for all of you to have a look at. It's free issue. It's been translated. Currently it's in English, Spanish and Chinese, because...
English is good enough.
So, but it's the ICMS-coalition.org. And you'll see the full breakdown. In 12 minutes, I wouldn't have had the time to go through the whole thing.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Maybe just a short one. For how much the real estate went up in the last 2 years since that high growth?
If you're talking Ireland,
Dublin,
it's gone up since lunchtime.
Since lunchtime, okay. Okay, thank you very much. I think we have to go on.